So, it is Seinfeld's 30th anniversary this year, and in honor of Seinfeld's 30th anniversary, I've decided to do a fun fact special. But seeing how I am not a fan of Seinfeld or an expert, I had to call in some help. So, I called on my friend Sean Graybill. So, Sean, you want to say hello to our wonderful audience?
Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're having an awesome afternoon, and it's great to be here with you.
So, Sean, how long have you been in the student here?
This is my third year here at LBC. I'm a student in the communication department, and as Morgan said, I am an avid fan of Seinfeld.
Avid's a little bit of an understatement, but he does know a lot of facts. So, all right. So to kick us off, Seinfeld has always had interesting characters. I've never been able to bond with the characters in Seinfeld, but they've always been interesting, and I'll admit that. So what is something special that the producers did with the character development?
Sure, I think not being able to bond with the characters is almost, in a sense, what Larry David, one of the producers of the show, was going for. One of his main themes that he stated in creating Seinfeld was the idea of no hugs and no learning, which is this idea that, unlike other shows and sitcoms, the characters don't necessarily grow and develop over time. So whereas in a different show like This Is Us, you can see a progression from the characters from the beginning of the series and the season to the end, in Seinfeld, you have these characters that often remain flat throughout the season, throughout the series, and they're going through different situations. And it's really the situations they find themselves in that define the characters more than how they grow.
Okay, so that makes sense. So I feel like this is a pretty bold choice for a producer to make, is it not?
It's definitely bold, and I think that's what made Seinfeld as explosive as it was. It was a new way of writing a sitcom that hadn't really been explored before, and we kind of see that open up into more modern shows such as The Office and Parks and Rec, which could be controversial. Fans out there of these two shows might not want to be compared to Seinfeld, but then again, some fans might appreciate that comparison where you see this perhaps non-linear or non-traditional way of writing a sitcom where it's not necessarily four members of a family on the couch learning a life lesson with a father figure or a strong leading family, but it's these flawed human beings that we can poke fun at, that we can laugh at, and perhaps that's part of why so many people relate so well to Seinfeld.
Okay, so Sean's getting super deep with this. He's doing more than what I asked him to do, but we'll run with it. So I'm going to back up and The Office is never going to be on the same playing field as Seinfeld.
I agree, Seinfeld will always be number one, but The Office is a close second, which might not be what you meant, but I'm going to take that as what you meant.
See, now if you guys didn't catch that, he twisted my words backwards there.
Which is exactly what someone on Seinfeld might do, such as a George Costanza. I just pulled a George there.
Good job. I don't think that's a life achievement, but I'll give you a good job for that. Okay, so Seinfeld lasted for many seasons. What is it, 9 or is it less than 9?
It's either 9 or 10, but at least 9.
Yeah, so it lasted for a lot of seasons. So this character development really worked for them. This new way of sitcom really worked for them. So I'm bad at phrasing questions. I'll try this again.
We'll get there, don't worry.
What are some ways that Seinfeld kind of pokes fun at itself and creates these meta instances?
Sure. So in many of these situations, we see Seinfeld kind of playing or toying with the conventions of society. And it goes both ways, both in favor for the characters and against them as well. So we see characters like Jerry and Elaine desiring or questioning things of other people, such as communicating with grammar and exclamation points even in a way that they're used to. But then when other people who aren't the main characters come back to Jerry, Kramer, Elaine, and George, they're not always as willing to budge on their principles. And we might think, that's such a little point or a small hill to die on, but at the same time, don't we do that in our daily lives every day?
No.
No? Okay, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the only one who can relate. That's okay.
I'm just always going to assume that I have a higher moral high ground than Seinfeld does, so I'm not going to agree with you.
You heard it here first, folks. If you like Seinfeld, apparently you have a low moral ground, but we're all in it together. Seinfeld fans, we can unite on our low ground. We'll take Anakin on that one.
Okay, there's going to be 3 3 of you storming the gates of Area 51 on this, but, all of you will be shot, so...
In the words of Princess Bride, boys, have fun storming the castle.
So, putting references aside, here, I'll just turn it over to you. I should dial back my questions. What is a fun fact that really shocked you when you were looking up for Seinfeld?
Sure, so I did a little bit of research for today, partly to refresh my own memory and partly to see if there's anything out there that was new that I could learn and bring to the table.
He's covering up, he's not a true fan.
Wow, that hurts me just to hear, but we're just going to roll with it. We're going to ignore that little remark there. First fact of the day that I have for you guys, the character Newman, Jerry's arch nemesis, actually doesn't have a first name. Throughout the show, we always hear Jerry or sometimes George go, Newman, whenever there's a frustrating moment with that character, but he's never referred to by a first name. And this was something that they actually played with Kramer's character for a while, as he went by Kramer, until his name was revealed, his first name was revealed to be Cosmo in an episode in one of the later seasons. So there's this whole big reveal where they finally find out Cosmo Kramer's first name, and yet we never find out Newman's first name. Now, the conspiracy goes deeper. There's some speculation that Newman's first name is actually Norman, because in the episode The Bottle Deposit Part 2, Season 7, Episode 2, Newman meets a farmer's daughter, and she yells out, "Goodbye, Norman," as he's running away from the farmhouse. So, in reality, this was actually the daughter's actress's mistake. She misread Newman for Norman in the script, but the producers found the mistake so funny, they kept the error in the show, and it's led to this fan theory today. One more piece to add on to that. In the episode The Package, Season 8, Episode 5, Newman has a business card that is shown, and it reads simply Newman, no first name.
Okay, that is pretty interesting. I feel like there's a little bit of character development there by making him be called Norman when his name's really Newman. I feel like they broke their little box there, Meg.
Oh, there's all kind of breaking of boxes. The fourth wall is broken, boxes are thought outside of, it's all over the place.
Yeah. Okay. So wait, is Kramer's first name Cosmos? Is it spelled with a C or a K?
With a C and no S at the end, so just Cosmo. Like the abbreviation of the magazine, although I don't know if anything was drawn. Maybe his mom was inspired by Cosmopolitan magazine. I don't know if that's something we could talk about on WJTL Studio B, but Cosmopolitan and Seinfeld, you're risky topics for today, folks.
Well, at least for anything, you're going to get plugged for WJTL.
That's right.
Alright, so his name is just Cosmo. That is very interesting. So he went several seasons without having a first name ever.
Several seasons. I want to say it was season 7 or sometime around there. Yes.
Out of 10 seasons, why don't you just stick with just not giving him a first name at that point?
I guess they decided for some reason it should be revealed that the cat was let out of the bag and he was revealed his name was Cosmo.
Okay. Alright, risky move on Seinfeld's part. Alright, so what other fun facts do you got?
Sure. So Festivus, the holiday mentioned in Seinfeld as a faux sort of Christmas, was actually not created by George's father, Frank Costanza, within the show. It actually wasn't really made during the time of the show itself. So the fake holiday was created well before the series was even conceived in 1966 by an editor of Reader's Digest named Dan O'Keefe, who created it to celebrate the anniversary of his first date with his wife. Festivus came to the script of Seinfeld by way of O'Keefe's son, who was working as a writer on Seinfeld. And then they added in the aluminum pole as their own artistic spin on Festivus. So if you are a true Festivus fan or fanatic, your holiday dates back even before the time of Seinfeld, and you can claim your collective heritage to at least 1966.
Okay, so are there people out there who celebrate Festus because it's a Seinfeld holiday?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are many good reasons to celebrate Festivus, and I promote celebrating Festivus alongside Christmas. I say, why not both? Don't discount one or the other. But having that aluminum pole, the airing of grievances, how could anyone forget that? And then ending it all with a feats of strength in which a wrestling match determines when Festivus officially ends. I don't know if there's a better holiday than that, but besides celebrating Jesus, of course, that takes the cake.
You're edging on dangerous territory here.
Right,
Sean.
right.
You might have to do the Bible classes again if you keep this up.
I might. That's a possibility. I'm going to chapel tomorrow morning, so hopefully that'll redeem my soul a little bit.
Yeah. You have to tie yourself over till Sunday.
Right.
So is Festivus a holiday that your family fully practices, or?
Myself and my dad, at least for sure, we definitely embrace Festivus. I think my mom embraces it to humor us, as well as my sister. But for myself and my dad, we embrace Festivus.
Okay, so if any of you lonely Festivus celebrators out there want some more people to celebrate with, Sean and his dad are going to have a Festivus party this year.
All of the grievances will be aired, so come on out and air your grievances with us.
See, you don't even have to know Sean. You can just air your grievances and he won't be insulted because you guys won't have the same grievances.
Exactly, and that's how we roll.
There you go. Alright, so anything other interesting facts come up?
Sure, so there's a famous episode, The Junior Mint, in which Jerry and Kramer are watching an operation take place. And during the course of the operation, Kramer's eating Junior Mints, and he offers one to Jerry, who knocks it out of his hand, and it goes flying through the air.
I love how this is Jerry's fault.
Well, it's a mix of both. It's both Jerry and Kramer's fault. I mean, Jerry does hit Kramer's hand. Kramer's the one who offered the mint. It's quite refreshing, after all. How can you blame him? But when they filmed the mint flying through the air in oh so a dramatic fashion, at first when they filmed the Junior Mint, it was too small to capture with the camera. So in the end, they actually had to film an Oreo as the stand-in for the Junior Mint. So if you ever felt like you might not have been special enough to have a stunt double, just remember, the Junior Mint from Seinfeld had a stunt double of an Oreo. Keep that in the back of your head.
I feel like that needs to be the new motivational poster for the communications department. Is that a Junior Mint was supposed to be replaced with an Oreo?
Exactly. If a Junior Mint can get a stunt double, so can you. That's your motivation for today.
That you're so special. Okay. No, we actually had a Seinfeld watching party last night, and we were watching Junior Mint again. And it baffles me. The plot setup for a Seinfeld episode goes back to what Sean was saying before of how the episode will develop the characters more than the characters will develop the episode. Because it's just an episode of Seinfeld is just a catastrophic event after another, and then there's an ending. Is this a good way to set up future sitcoms, or is this purely a Seinfeld thing?
I think it hit its peak in Seinfeld. I would be extremely surprised if another show could replicate what Seinfeld did to the level and the extent that Seinfeld did it. I'm tempted to say it's a product of its era too. I think there's something about the early 90s where everything is so raw and everything's still growing towards an age of technology where there's a lot of this uncertainty and boundaries are kind of being tested, especially cultural and sociological boundaries. I mean, there's a Twitter account called Seinfeld Current Day where they toy with the idea of what would the show look like with modern day innovations like cell phones and iPads and Jerry get Apple Watch and things like that. But I think Seinfeld played with this idea so beautifully that the characters don't learn, and yet the situations they find themselves in are still new each episode. That it's an excellent starting point for writers of sitcoms today to bounce off of, but I think what you see a lot of times is people trying to bring in different elements, whether it's through shows like Modern Family or The Goldbergs, or even a couple years ago like The Office.
Yeah, okay. I remember watching The Goldbergs. My mother loves The Goldbergs, and I'm kind of seeing how The Goldbergs is a little similar to Seinfeld, but Americans love their sitcoms. They really do, and there's thousands of them. And it amazes me how different each writing structure is for all of them, even though it's such a specific genre, and but you can have so many of them because everyone writes them so differently. That's pretty fascinating. Okay, so would you watch so this year was the 30th anniversary, right, of Seinfeld. So if they produced a re-airing or an added-on seasons of Seinfeld, would you watch them, or did you want to keep the old Seinfeld purchase?
I would absolutely watch it. I would dive into it and enjoy every minute of it. They've actually done kind of similar things to that. Jerry has his series now, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, and I believe for one of those episodes, or it might have been another thing that Jerry or Larry David was related to, they kind of brought the whole cast back together and they sat in a coffee shop environment and they kind of had almost like a new episode of Seinfeld, or kind of reliving some of those moments of the past. So it's neat to see how the legacy of Seinfeld still lives on through shows like Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And even as the actors grow and develop in new and different shows and roles, it's fun to see them still come back together and relive some of those characters, which, surprise, surprise, after all this time, haven't necessarily changed.
That makes sense. Makes sense a little too well. I don't even know the actors' names for everyone, but like, has Elaine and George and Kramer gone on to perform in other things? Because I can't think of anything I've seen them in.
Yeah, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who plays Elaine, I know she had a new series, The New Adventures of Old Christine, that was on, I think, in the mid-2000s, I want to say. So she had that. The actor who played George, Jason... why can't I? Jason Alexander, yeah. Michael Richards is Kramer, Jason Alexander is George. I always mix their names up. But anyway, Jason Alexander was actually, he played a guest role in an episode of Friends, where he and Phoebe have an interaction. He doesn't play the character George, he plays, he's a salesman, I forget, he's some kind of telemarketer salesman type thing. But it's funny, because the character he plays in that show is quite depressed in the episode, and you can definitely see elements of George coming out in that character that Jason is playing, and I think that's funny to see him relive some of those elements in an entirely different show.
Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting. I can't even think of what episode he's in. I just binge watched is a big word, but I binge watched Friends all of this year. Like, this was like one of my minor goals of this year.
It's an excellent goal.
Was to finish Friends, and I finally finished it this summer, and I can't even think of what episode he's in.
It looks like it's season 7, episode 13, and I believe he's having problems at work, and what Phoebe does is she goes in and talks to him to try to encourage him and pick him up.
That's right. This is when Phoebe gets to tell her marketer job, and
yes,
and he's very sad, and none of his coworkers are paying attention to him. That's
exactly.
Right.
Yep.
That was a really good performance, though, because I remember that, but I don't remember like watching it and I'm looking at him and going, oh, this is George. Like, usually when you see characters in other things, you're like, oh, well, that's Phoebe. What is she doing? You know, and this is us. Like, it's you take that sentimental value of that character and drop them in. So maybe this was an advantage to Seinfeld, to not building characters that these actors could go on and do different things.
Sure, absolutely. I'll play off that a little bit. The actress who played Monica was actually in Seinfeld. She had a one-episode role in Seinfeld before she went on to become quite successful in Friends.
Yeah.
She was one of Jerry's girlfriends and pretended to be his wife in order to get a discount at a dry cleaning store. And that's, if you haven't seen Seinfeld, that's almost the epitome of Seinfeld, pretending to be someone's wife in order to save a few bucks on your dry cleaning. That's about as Seinfeld as it gets.
Exactly. I would make a Jewish joke if I could think of one, but I can't.
See, I feel like we might be approaching that line again, but
maybe.
You know, Seinfeld approached the line, so maybe we're allowed to approach the line. Maybe it's all fair game. Who knows? It's all on love. Love to everyone out there.
Exactly. Alright, you got any other exciting facts for us to leave with our audience?
Yeah, there's plenty out there. So one of the fun elements of Seinfeld is how meta it is. And what I mean by that is it's very self-referential, which for devoted fans of the series will love and appreciate how often Seinfeld goes back to connect with itself, to tie back in with itself, and references different tidbits throughout the series that the observant fan will catch. And I'll start off with the biggest one of them all, even kind of touching on some classical literary elements a little bit. the very first conversation between Jerry and George in Seinfeld starts out with Jerry talking about the button on George's shirt and how it's in a terrible spot. It basically makes or breaks the whole shirt. And at the end, spoiler alert, I mean, it's the season finale was out, so I mean, if you haven't seen it by now, you should have seen it, so not really a spoiler. But spoiler, the very last conversation Jerry and George have while sitting in jail after they get arrested for not following the Good Samaritan law is Jerry commenting on the button on George's shirt. And George asks him, have we had this conversation before? I feel like we've had this conversation before. And it just goes pretty much full circle from the beginning of the show. And again, it goes back to the idea of they haven't grown at all. 10 seasons later, and they're still talking about the button on George's shirt.
That was pretty amazing. Yeah, you gotta admire the writers of Seinfeld, that they created a mission and they really stuck to it. I'm really impressed that it lasted as many seasons as it did. But no, this was really awesome. I did learn a lot. My favor towards Seinfeld has not swayed any, but Sean's okay with that on some level, I'm sure.
I'm okay with it. Just like evangelizing, they say it takes 7 outreach events in order to reach someone's heart, so we'll count this as 1 of 7, and fingers crossed there'll be at least 6 more.
Yeah, Sean's doing God's work slowly but surely. But thank you so much, Sean, for coming on. Up next is going to be See You Again by Great Havens, and then we're going to do some highlights of the weekend.
WJTL Studio B.